I'm a visual artist. I work with a range of media, sculpture, photography, installation and some video. For the past few years I've been making work about agriculture and food production with a focus on cattle breeding and how current scientific research into genetics particularly is influencing that. Yeah. I'm from Inishowen Peninsula up in Donegal, so quite up near the top. That influences my work a lot, just this focus on the rural and farming. More recently I've been making work reflecting on that kind of smaller farming practices, and maybe that type of farming is like dying out now, and yeah. Back in 2011, I was asked by a curator up home, Declan Sheehan, to make work that would respond to as well as integrate into an agricultural show up home, up in Carndonagh. Looking at agriculture and farming was not something that I'd engaged with before, so I was quite interested to sort of see what I could come up with for that. And so around that time I had recently been told about these Belgian blue cattle, and I'd never heard of this breed before. They have a genetic defect. I guess one of the most extreme breeds you'll come across, because their nickname at the time was the Arnold Schwarzenegger cow. They're incredibly muscular. They have twice as much of each muscle group. The breed was established about 150 years ago. Yeah, so for the agricultural show up in Carn in 2011, I decided to make a series of garlands out of AI straw, artificial insemination straw, and there are these storage receptacles for bull semen for artificial insemination. So I used them with the really old handcraft of like straw weaving to make a series of prize-winning garlands for the Belgian blue breeds. That's how I kind of got into this agricultural subject matter, and I kind of seen the response to it, and you know how I could engage with like a new audience as well, like an audience outside of the gallery space. And for me that was really rewarding, you know, as an artist, you know, to kind of try something new, take me out of my comfort zone in terms of my creative practice. That's where I kind of get the most, you know, out of it. I have a really strong studio practice, and that's like I go to the studio every day. It's like where I work from. The sculptural parts are very craft orientated, so it does involve a lot of time in the studio making and engaging with these sort of strange materials. And then that's countered then with going out into the field, kind of literally, you know, to speak to farmers, you know, about their work. And then I also would visit like scientific labs and like have conversations with researchers. And then all that kind of information gathering then is sort of taken back into the studio and sort of weaved into the work in a way. But yeah, the studio itself goes through stages of being incredibly chaotic and then right up to an exhibition, and then the stuff leaves and then you're left with this kind of empty space. It involves more and more so now speaking to people outside of the studio, say that are involved in farming, or people that are involved in like some sort of genetic research, and visiting labs, you know, and they're like, I find them to be really, it's a real privilege to be allowed access to that, you know. Yeah, I really enjoy being out in farmyards and stuff. I mean, it's something that I did as a kid growing up. Like my parents weren't farmers, but both sets of grandparents were, and then I grew up, say, in the countryside helping like neighbours with cattle and sheep and stuff, so I really enjoy going back to that. I guess recently, like in the past few years, it's definitely been like farmers, you know, them sharing with me like memories of their farms and stuff, you know. But then obviously other artists like Sarah Lucas, Haegu Yang, should be a Korean artist who makes installations, but yeah, then yeah, people. The materials, the physical materials that I use are really integral to the objects that I make, and they're chosen, you know, based on their sort of reason for being in the world. But then I kind of, I guess, try and flip that on its head or disrupt that a bit by taking it into the studio and manipulating it into like another form, into a sculpture. But because of their inherent, you know, what they are, you know, while they're in the sculpture, they're pointing towards their original function. And I guess that's how I use materials to make things. There was one work, part of the SAR series. It's called Environmental Footprint Cornucopia Biovac CH2218. It's a large-scale photograph that shows a Charolais bull wearing a sculpture on its back in the shape of a cornucopia. And so it's part of the SAR series, and that series looked at the use of genomics in modern cattle breeding. Cattle that have less environmental footprint. You know, a lot of it will be based on the methane emissions. And so the cornucopia that I've made out of the AI straws, the narrow end of it goes into a kind of a tube that points up to the mouth of the bull to sort of point towards the methane emissions that cattle produce. So yeah, that was one work that was particularly focused on environmental sort of issues. I guess, making work in these sort of more agricultural settings gives me access to a wider audience, like the agricultural community. Typically, they wouldn't necessarily be the people that would walk into a gallery space, on a regular basis. So, and because I'm making work about their world and like their work, what they do every day to produce food to feed the rest of us, I thought it was an important gesture for me to step into their world and like challenge my work to be presented to them in a place that they're kind of comfortable in. So in addition to bringing my work to like agricultural settings, I do also show it in the more traditional gallery settings. I guess it gives like maybe audiences in maybe more urban settings access to like my research into like agricultural practices, and it allows a space to sort of think about how their food is produced and reflect on that. Yeah, in primary school it was something like I think everyone enjoyed. But then in secondary school, obviously, you choose it as a subject, and it's something that you start to take, more seriously. I knew I was either going to study art or science, and like biology particularly. So they were always my two strongest subjects, and I guess now I can see, obviously those two things have come back together. So yeah, I feel incredibly lucky to be an artist, and to have managed to get to a point where I'm doing it pretty much full time. To be in the studio like the majority of the time is like, for me that was the dream, so I'm hoping I'll be able to maintain that. But yeah, I'm very, very lucky to be in this position.